How's it going, everyone? About to start in just 1 second for intro to web development. So, exciting stuff. Okay, well, here we are. How's it going, everyone? My name is Zane. I'm a coach here at MLH, and I'm going to take you all through the intros of web development. Should be a pretty fun time. I've done quite a bit with web dev myself. I basically taught myself it exclusively for about a year and a half. So I've done quite a bit with like basic tools like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, learned some frameworks and all sorts of different stuff really over that span of time. So, but today we're just going to focus on the basics, where you get started, just what things that are helpful to be cognizant of and to learn. And we will walk ourselves through that right now. Hello. We got a lot of people in the chat today. Awesome. Lots of hellos. I love it. Hope everyone's doing good. I'm curious, who here in the chat has done web dev before? Have any of you taken a stab at it yourself, or is it completely new for you? Just curious. Okay, so let's go ahead and start to get things underway here. We are going to learn a little bit about front-end web development. Is going to be our focus today, just like the things that the user can actually interact with and see directly. So let's see. So you'll be taking web dev in college soon. Nice. Yeah. My college that I go to, there's a lot of people that go for the like basic web design classes, basic web development classes. Actually going to be helping tutor those on campus, so that'll be pretty fun. We've worked on a project for fun. Nice. Brand new to web development. Yeah, so hopefully with this stream, you guys will just be able to get a sense of what goes into web development and what sort of tools and the like, what they each do, so on and so forth. For fun. And wow, Shem-Marie, awesome. Web dev with a focus on accessible web design and dev. Very good. Always good to specialize too, especially for such a important user base. So with that, without further ado, let's get into our little presentation here. So we're going to start with just looking at a basic web page and kind of understanding what exactly is going on within it. So here, a page everyone knows and loves, Google's homepage. Nothing too crazy about it in and of itself, but what I want to focus on is the fact that it, as well as every other web page, uses, well, almost every web page, we'll get to that, is really dependent upon three core technologies: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So HTML is the first one that we're going to talk about. HTML is, people call it a markup language. It's essentially it's not really a scripting language. It's just semantics, honestly. It's essentially just a language that you use to create structure for your page. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. So here we have a Google page. If I want to condense this right down to the, let's see. Here I'm on a web browser, and in your web browser, especially Chrome-based ones, I think Mozilla-based ones too, have something called your dev tools. I'm sure all sorts of browsers do. But in a lot of browsers nowadays, you have access to what are called your dev tools. And your dev tools are kind of a way to take a sneak peek at really what's going on within a particular web page. You can see like some of the core files, some of the core code. It's pretty handy. So this one is kind of scrunched with how I have it currently. But I want to take you all through, I want to essentially decompose this Google homepage into its different core technologies and how things are built up that way. So we're going to focus on HTML in a second, which is kind of like the structure and the content of the page. But there's also CSS, which is like the styling and the look of the page. as well as JavaScript, which is the essentially like the functionality of your page and the interactivity of your page, as well as many other things. But that's kind of good enough to know for now. So what we can do, we can actually take away the styling. There's a bit of code that we can write for this. I probably still have it saved in my console if I go. Here we go. Okay, so this code, if you guys can see it, in the bottom right-hand corner is kind of cryptic, but essentially what it'll do is just take away the styling of the page so that it looks like an absolute mess. Isn't that just beautiful? So we took away the CSS, which is the technology that deals with the styling and the like. There's still some active here, it looks like, but we'll kind of get to that. I'm surprised I didn't do everything, honestly. Oh well. I mean, we can go to another website too and do the same thing. Like if you want to do Wikipedia or even GitHub, actually. Actually, let's do that. Yeah. Or even better, MLH. If we go here, we take away our CSS, we can see just the, right, so this is how a page looks like without being styled. This is just the pure contents. Now, of course, it's kind of unusable. It's kind of ugly, just like this. But you need the starting point. You do need to have all this stuff on your page. Look at that, crazy. So what is all this stuff? Where does it come from? This is all a result of HTML. So if you see on the right-hand side here, we're going to look at more digestible examples. I figured I'd just throw you guys into some actual web pages to just kind of see, just kind of immerse at first, and then we'll kind of break things down in a more digestible way, one step at a time. You can see like on this right-hand side here, we have these just entities where I highlight over them. You can see they're highlighted on the page. This is like encompassing everything essentially, but we can get a bit more specific, blah, 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 like here. So this is the like the information for this particular like logo here. There's a bit more going on inside, but you kind of get the gist. As we go down, oh, probably in the different sections, yeah. So as we go down, oh, lots of nesting. We'll kind of talk about what's going on here in just a moment. But you can see there's these different aspects of the page, right? So you can see there's this text here that makes this text show up on the page. I can go in, I can even edit it really. I'm hacking MLH, not for real though. This is why you can't trust screenshots, by the way. Anyone can do this. They can just pull up their web browser and boot up their dev tools and go on and like actually change the text to things. Here, I'll show you. It's actually kind of crazy. So you can go like this. I don't know. I'm currently changing the text on my end for Beginners Week. Now, this is not going to upload it to the website or anything, but it will change. Right, it has the same styling and everything too. So can never trust screenshots at the end of the day. Just something good to know. But anyways, right. So again, we can take away the styling. This gets us just our pure content, our pure information. This pure content, pure information, this is all within the domain of HTML, which again, we'll kind of go over in detail in a little bit. The styling, which we definitely appreciate now, just seeing what a page looks like without this styling. The styling applies to the HTML to make things actually like look good. So pretty crazy. Let me just keep up with the chat here. Okay, nice. HTML in school, XML, MySQL course. Yes, especially with some tech stuff, honestly. Kind of cool, but kind of scary, all the developments. Document design mode on. Also fun to edit text, run it in the console. I'll have to check that out at some point. I don't want to do too crazy experimentation. I'm not familiar with that. At least right off the bat. Okay, so with that, so we see where CSS comes in. right? It kind of speaks for itself after that very grand contrast. So HTML is for structure and content. CSS is for styling and the presentation of that content. In JavaScript, your last kind of fundamental tool is your actual scripting language. So HTML is a markup language. CSS is a style sheet language, I guess you could say. And JavaScript is like your bona fide, actual, genuine programming language. People don't consider HTML and CSS programming languages because they have limited, if any, scripting abilities, whereas JavaScript is a genuine programming language. So HTML and CSS are kind of their own thing, but JavaScript is similar to languages like Python or Swift, stuff like that. If this isn't ringing a bell or just not clicking for you at the moment, no big deal. Just some additional context that might resonate with some people. But at this point, let's show a little bit with, is there really much for JavaScript? Let me see. Well, this could be accomplished with CSS technically. I want to see if there's, at least on Google, like, what would be a good one? So you can have basic interactivity with HTML, like just linking to like websites. You can actually do that in HTML. Again, we'll kind of cover this stuff in detail. But something like searching by voice, the fact that, so if I have, let's explain it like this. I have this image icon here, right? In fact, we can probably identify this. Yeah, it's just an image icon. So it's just an image. The fact that I click on that image, just in and of itself, doesn't really have any functionality to it, just right out of the gate. It's kind of like a light switch in your house. If you start with just a light switch, not hooked up to anything, well, it's not gonna do anything. Like there's no real functionality. There's nothing that it's hooked up to, right? So it's not gonna do anything. You have to implement the functionality that you want for it. So light switch can, turn on your lights. It can turn on your garbage disposal. It can turn on your fan in the room, all sorts of stuff. You have the control of what you want it to do. Same thing here with JavaScript. Kind of the most basic way that you can use it for web pages is to add basic functionality. So when I have this icon here, again, no inherent functionality until I kind of use some JavaScript on it, where I have JavaScript identify this entity, and I tell JavaScript, when I click on this, I want it to start capturing the user's voice or start capturing, their microphone feed. And then once the microphone feed is done, then JavaScript will also say, okay, now that you have this audio from the microphone feed, I want you to do a web search with it. So yeah, like I said, JavaScript is all about the functionality of things in a pretty deep way, right? Even just with this one click of the button, there's quite a few stages. There's quite a few things that it does with it at the end of the day. So JavaScript is pretty, we'll kind of talk about it later. A lot of things that we'll talk about later. But JavaScript is sometimes, nowadays people essentially use it in and of itself to also write HTML and CSS because it's just, scripting languages are just so powerful. But we'll cover that a little bit later on. Let's see. Just looking in the chat now. I want to make sure I don't leave anyone behind here. Is JavaScript similar to Java? They're both scripting languages, but they definitely have their differences. I guess it's not kind of a generic answer, I guess. I don't know if that really tells you too much. I actually just took a Java class over the fall semester, and it was more object-oriented, the Java course. I think Java kind of just is in general. I think people use Java for web apps. I don't know. Anyways, to be frank with you, I don't really know enough to intelligently answer your question. But I will say overall, if you know one, getting into the other really isn't that bad whatsoever. Like if you were to know HTML and CSS and you try to pick up Java, it'd be a completely different game. But if you knew JavaScript and then you tried to pick up Java, you'd feel pretty comfortable. There's a lot of overlap because again, like scripting languages. Yeah, Java and JavaScript don't have any fundamental connection. I think there's some sort of story. Yeah, there's some sort of story with the name. I think it's that like Java was just, big programming thing that people knew about. So JavaScript kind of capitalized on that. I might be getting that wrong, but sounds about right from what I remember. Okay, let's see. But yeah, so JavaScript is kind of you can use other scripting languages for web development, but from what I understand, everything always ultimately becomes JavaScript because web browsers essentially understand three things at their most fundamental core: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So can JavaScript be replaced on the browser? Could you clarify your question a bit more? I'm not exactly sure what you mean. As in, like, could you use, instead of JavaScript, could you use like Python? Is that what you're asking? Okay, so with that, just kind of bring us back here. So we looked at HTML, which is like the structure of your page, right? So if we really wanted to see HTML in its raw glory, we have it right here. CSS is the styling. And JavaScript is the functionality, which would kind of help you do things like more complex button presses, more complex actions on button presses. JavaScript will also run things in the background, like capturing user data for like analytics or like SEO stuff. But JavaScript can do basically everything, but we won't get into that for intro to web dev demonstration. So now that we have kind of gotten a bit familiar with the basic tools in terms of seeing them in actual websites, I want to take you guys through just the basics of writing this sort of code for yourself. Like, how do you write basic HTML? How do you write basic CSS? How do you write basic JavaScript? How do you put them all together to make a basic web page? That's what we'll focus on going forward. So let me go ahead and pull up my coding environment. Development. Hack week. Is anyone else starting school this Monday or this upcoming week? I'm curious what everyone else's classes are going. Basic site. And what classes are you guys taking? I'm going for electrical engineering now. I did web development for quite a while, but I just realized I like websites, but I don't want to like spend all my time with them. I know enough to be into like, professionally specialize in them. I know enough to make my way around the web and like do some cute stuff with it for, additional usability and value, but that's kind of just happy with that. I find the natural world a lot more interesting, but web dev is still pretty cool. Lots of great career opportunities and the like with it as well. But here, so, okay, I'm gonna have to juggle screen shares quite a bit. So there might be a little bit of a lag with showing everyone the basics of how this goes. But actually, I wonder, well, yeah, you know what? I should start with just this. So I'm gonna share my coding environment. Have intro to programming and Calc 2. Nice. Yeah, lots of people going back to school. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, we're pretty student focused at MLH, so that's great. Data structure, math, and Java, learning to make GUI. Ooh, yeah, I just took a Java course in the fall semester, like I said, and we had to use quite a few tools for Java GUI, or for making GUIs via Java. I think we used like Java, what was it? Like Java's like JX Swing or something like that. And I don't know. We had to use a IDE called, hold on, I'm just getting this up. We had to use an IDE called NetBeans, of all things. Never heard of it outside of that class. But okay, so here, essentially what I did is that on my computer, I made a folder called Basic Sites. This should just be the name of your web project, whatever it is. If you're making a website for a dog bakery, you can call it, dog bakery site or whatever the business name is, whatever you want to do. So I made a folder on my computer to house all the files for this website. So we said that we're going to do HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I'm going to start with just the HTML file. I'm going to create a file just called index.html. Oops, why are you doing this? Oh, here, index.html. Okay, so now your HTML page can be called anything. This file can really be called anything. This is just going to like serve as my home page. So you could call it home, or you could call it anything that you want, as long as you have .html after it. That way the browser can recognize it. But I'm going to call it index because index is kind of it's like the standard homepage file name. And web crawlers and like certain software and search engines and all that, they look for index.html. They look for that as a file name. A lot of them do, to just kind of lock in on your homepage automatically. So it's not like 100% required, but it is, from what I understand, considered best practice. So we're going to follow suit with that. So with this, we have an HTML file. Now we just have to write some HTML. So honestly, just in its current state, you could actually open this in a web browser and your browser would display it. Now, obviously, there's nothing to display, so it would just be a white screen. I would show you that, but again, I'd have to juggle my screens. I don't really feel like doing that. Just take a little bit of time. But if I were to type in like hello world or whatever, then it would just show like a white screen with white text. In fact, I'll keep this in here. We'll kind of see what it looks like later on. But well, actually, you know what? We can do this. I wish there's a way to share both. That would actually be really, really helpful. I don't think there is. Let me do nunjucks, HTML, blah, blah, blah. Don't mind this. Okay, so we can do hello, world. Let's say I want to make a blog website. I can say this is my website for my blog. I can say hello world, my name is Zane. This is my website for my blog. Please browse and enjoy. Very nice of me. Oh, I can't do, it's yelling at me. Smiley face. There we go. Just to be safe. I don't think I can do split screen. I tried it before. Or I've kind of peeked around a little bit and I couldn't. This should be good though. Let me do, at least as far as I know, I don't think I can do split screen. But here, with this anyways, I'm going to open this in my web browser. Just this basic thing of code. Or not even like code, really. It's just standard English that I wrote out. And with that, we're going to be able to see this web page. So I'll share my screen. Chrome tab. Here we go. So hopefully you can see that. Okay, so let me kind of zoom in a little bit so you can read it better. So this is my basic HTML page, right? In fact, I can go into the, can you see this? Oh, you can't see the browser tools, annoying. Okay, let me do this. Share screen. Let me just share my entire desktop at this point. This is being annoying. I guess I could just share my entire desktop. Not perfect, but I guess it works. So I've ran my, or I'm not ran, I haven't ran any code or anything. I just saved like static text. I just saved text to this file, that's all. And with that, I have, I opened this HTML file up in the web browser and you can see it displayed here. So like I said, you can just open an empty HTML file in the browser. It's not a big deal. Refresh it. You see there's nothing, but it's recognizing that it's an HTML file. The browser naturally, like if I double click on it in Windows Explorer, my web browser will naturally open it because my computer knows that it associates HTML files with the web browser. So now I type in this language here, refresh, and we can see I have that there. Now the issue with this is there's like no styling, or even worse than that, before I even get to there, there's no way to differentiate the content in a meaningful way for in quite a number of ways, as we'll go on to see. But one of them is for, say, like web crawlers or search engines. So say I have my beautiful web browser or my beautiful blog website. So this is kind of like the intro of it, right? This is how you do comments in HTML. So comments are like bits of code that will not be recognized, that will not be implemented into the final like program. It's just ignored. So it's nice for giving context to things. So this is like the intro of my website. Now let's say I want to have an article section, like articles. Article number 1, how I learned about web dev. I don't know. Let's say article 2, how I learned about Java, or why I hate Java GUI, because I do. It's not that bad. But anyways, so you can see I have these different sections now where it's like, okay, well, let me do, what's one more? Contact me. So email me at the following addresses. Notreal at notreal.com. So, you know, you can see that there's like different contextual areas and there's different contextual information, so on and so forth, that I have to, that would really be helpful to give like search engines, web crawlers, and really just users, as we'll come to see, give them ability to differentiate between like the meaning and the meaning of what we have here. So if I refresh into it, it's like it's just all on one line, right? It's just not very, it fails in a lot of different ways, right? This is not really the thing that we want to do. So with that, what we want to do instead is use semantic HTML. And this is really where HTML shines, is instead of just writing like raw text like this, what you do instead is you use HTML elements, they're called. HTML elements give context and like contextual grouping to your information, to your content on your web page. So for example, if I wanted to say, so there are like standard, you can't just make up your own HTML elements like willy-nilly. You can create your own, but that's way further down the line. And they all like derive from, essentially there's a basic set of HTML elements. There's actually quite a lot of them. There's a lot of HTML elements, but you know, there's quite a few that you'll use pretty often. One is this paragraph tag here. It just tells people this is a paragraph of text. All of this is like one continuous thing. I can break these up into, we'll talk about that in a second. So here I have like this paragraph of text. And here I have different, like say I have my different articles. Like say I want someone to be able to click on these and they can go to somewhere else in my, they can like go to another web page, which brings them to this article to read, right? So we could do, I guess we could do, there's an article, HTML tag, what it's, it would kind of work here. It kind of depends on how I want to do the page. Anyways, how we would want to use a div tag. So the paragraph tag that we saw here is used for like paragraphs of text. There's usually a little bit more in terms of your HTML elements, but this is just kind of a basic understanding of it. Helpful for paragraphs of text. Your div element is kind of like, it's a non-contextual. It doesn't have any inherent meaning to it. It's just for grouping like certain things against each other. So like what I can do here is say I take this article 1 and I put the content in this one div here. So let's say I take this article 2 and I also put it in its own div. So the reason why it's helpful to split these up is I can say, like later on when I'm working with CSS and JavaScript and all of that, one helpful thing that I could do is say, hey, here's this article 1, here's this like HTML element that it's contained within. And here's this article 2, here's its HTML element that is contained within, right? So there's a concrete separation between these two as different entities. And with that, I can just affect each separately from one another and separately from anything else on the page, right? Like say I want to hide this article 1, unless like say you have like a web page where there's like, little article things on the right-hand side of like, different things that you can click on and traverse to them to read. I can choose to hide an amount of them, or I can choose to, maybe this one, I want to have like a colored gel over it. And on this one, I want a different colored gel over this one. It's everything that you can, all the benefits that you can do of separating two things and being able to treat them differently. It's essentially just the same concept here. So let me just keep up with the chat here. Make sure I've got you all. Oh, my screen. Uh-oh. Sorry, y'all. Screen sharing also always gives me trouble. I'm like cursed with screen sharing. Okay, now we're looking at the back end of things. So thankfully, it'll be easy to kind of walk you through this very quickly. So essentially, what I did, we have our HTML here, right, with like nothing, with just plain text. So what we want to do is we want to give some context, some semantics to things, so that the web browser, so that the web browser, search engines, web crawlers, all that, and later utilization of CSS and JavaScript can just, have a field day with this content. Lots of helpful things that you can do. So I'm kind of breaking up my information here. So just more content, more content. So now I want to give semantic meaning to this stuff. So all this stuff here, it's kind of just like a paragraph of text, honestly. There's a few different ways you could treat it, depending on how I want to lay out my web page. But we'll just go for this right now. Now here in my article section, so again, this is like a blog website. Let me just make sure that this is, okay, good. So this is a blog website where I have my intro section, and I want to have this section that showcases my different articles that I'm working on, or my different articles that people can go on and read. So like say for this article 1, someone can click on it and they can go to a new page where they can read that article. Same thing for article 2. Again, we want these semantic HTML elements because they help segregate our content from one another so that we can like treat each of these elements differently, so that the web browser, search engines can do unique things to each element according to its nature. So here in this article 1, I gave it this article 1, I put it in a div tag. A div tag is like a context. It's a context list. It's a meaningless. I don't want to say it. It inherently has no meaning to it. Like a p tag, a paragraph tag, this is a paragraph of text. And there's certain things that you maybe want to do with paragraph elements as a whole. Whereas a div is makes a bit more sense as we get deeper into it. You don't really have to worry about it all too much in terms of the intricacies of what each tag does at the moment. But it's just kind of good to know that you have different HTML elements and they each kind of have a different thing that they stand for. So div, this is just to put all this information into one entity. Then same thing here with this article, number 2. Now this is its own entity of content. This is its own entity of contents. And from there, we can. Our web page shouldn't look too much different at the moment. What kind of blocks things up? Yeah, that kind of goes into some CSS stuff that we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, so with this particular, like say, with each particular article, not necessarily entry, but like each little box that a user can click on to then go on to access an article, they can we can give additional context to it, because even just this is not really the best. What you typically go on to do is, well, kind of depends on how you write your CSS or how you design like the design of your web page. Once you get down to things, everything becomes hyper contextual. That's just the nature of the real world. But I guess here we can kind of keep it simple. That's fine. You could say, we're gonna make this a heading. So like for this little thing here, let's say like this div, which is for, again, this is like an entity of content for this one particular article, article like showcase. I can say, okay, well, I'm gonna have a heading here. This tells the browser that this is the heading for this thing of content. And it's a little bit, well, kind of in context of the page as a whole, but we'll just kind of roll with this for now. And that we can use this, we can use what we call a span, or we could even use a paragraph, or is there a subtitle? No, subscript. Then we can use this here to kind of just communicate that this is a like subtext, like maybe it's even like a subheading to the subheading here. Oh, header body tag, oh crazy. Oh, whatever, needs to refresh it. So anyways, so yeah, eventually, like overall, you utilize HTML to give semantic meaning to things. Now, as of right now, it doesn't really seem that glamorous. Like, you know, why are we doing this, right? This is not really affecting too much on the page at the end of the day. But you'll kind of go on to see that it sets us up to, well, first, like I said, there's a lot of stuff that you don't see that happens with this. Like it makes the browser more easily able to parse out like context information, same thing for search engines, blah, blah, blah. But also sets you up to write your CSS so that you can style the page in an intelligent and efficient way. And they have like a styling system that just is efficient and intelligent, as well as to like your JavaScript and the like also. So you go on to see here. Just keeping up with chat. Yeah, that's the thing, is that like I could do full screen like I did just a few minutes ago, but you guys kind of see the back end of everything. Kind of looks ugly. But I mean, I guess that would be better than not being able to see my screen, huh? I wish I could pop chat out, actually. Can you do that? No, annoying. Anyways, so we kind of saw the basics of HTML. So what exactly is this used for? Like in terms of, like, as we said, styling and all that. But let's kind of see like how we practically implement it. Full screen was significantly better. Okay. Yeah, honestly, because you can see everything. Like it's infinitely more informative. I guess I'm caring too much about like production value. I'm glad you guys are keeping me honest on that though. I'll do full screen going forward. And I'll make sure that you guys can actually see it. How about that? Do share screen. Entire screen. Okay, so we got that mess, but we go in here. Make sure you guys are, yes. Okay, so anyways, so you need this HTML semantic elements. Again, don't really see how crazy it is or how helpful it is right off the bat, but it's kind of setting you up for being able to do your styling and your JavaScript and basically everything else, and to all that other stuff. So now, interesting thing that you can see here is, right, when I didn't have these elements, there was none of this, like, you know, everything was just on one line. But now that I've included these elements, things have changed a little bit on the page. So technically the styling of things have changed. The styling changed by these, like this Highland Web Dev, this Article 1, Highland Web Dev, Article 2. These all went on their own lines. That's actually the result of CSS. This Article 1 now being bold and larger font size, all of that, that's actually a result of CSS as well. So we actually haven't written any CSS. So it's kind of like, well, where did this come from? Like, why is the CSS changing? We haven't done anything ourselves. Long story short, the web browser actually its own default CSS that it kind of fundamentally carries for each HTML element. So for example, for this article 1 here, we had this, it was just like the text like everything else. But, before we had the HTML elements. But now that we've used the H2, it has this styling. And that's because H2s in general have a default styling applied by the web browser generally, at least in this case for this Chrome browser. But the styling stuff is relatively kind of follows the same philosophy across web browsers. There might be slight differences, but for example, like your heading tags, like this kind of goes in a sequence of like H1 for your main heading on a page. So that'll be like the largest in terms of its default styling. H2 is like your second most important in terms of your content, so it has like a slightly lesser default styling where the font size gets smaller, so on and so forth. So just important to know that your web browser will have automatic styling on certain HTML elements just right off the bat, just to make it, I guess, more user-friendly to people that just want to that are just kind of interested in the bare minimum. I don't really know, or just, I guess, just to aid the comprehensibility of a web page. Like even if you aren't writing any CSS, the inherent styling within the browser kind of reinforces the like how you're organizing your content. But a lot of times, in fact, basically 100% of the time that I do a website, I never want the default styling because I kind of want control of how I want things to look. Like say if I have my H2 headers, I might not want them to look like this, right? With this like serif font and the black, and it might not be the right font that I need. It might not be the right color that I need for the site's design. It might not be the right font size, all sorts of stuff. So a lot of times what people will do is something called the CSS reset. But actually, we'll kind of get into that a little bit later on. But essentially, they'll kind of wipe all of the CSS from all of the elements so that everything is like uniform in its styling, so that everything just kind of looks like how we had before, where there were no elements. But that gives you the ability to then target everything and kind of do its own, kind of have its own styling for whatever you want. It'll make more sense once we go into it in a second. But essentially, just important thing to know, your browser will automatically style things without you specifying any CSS. Just important to know that, because that explains like why this behavior is taking place. Now, what we want to do is just check in here. Or would I use it, H2? Yeah, so just a little bit of context. That's actually not the proper way to do it, how I was utilizing it. Your heading tags are your heading tags. It's not the fact that your H1 is bigger in the styling and your H2 is like smaller and your H3 is smaller than that. That's not what matters, because you can affect the styling of any HTML element, as we'll go on to see in just a moment. Because you can affect the styling of any element. You can style them however much you want, right? It's not you don't choose the element for the styling. You choose it for the contextualizing of the content on your page. So the reason why you want to use an H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, the reason why you have that set of H1s is to organize the content on your page. So your H1, in fact, I should have had an H1 from the start. In fact, there's actually a few tags that I'm missing here, but that we'll kind of touch upon in a little bit. Like a body tag, like your HTML tag, body tag, all that. Your H1 is like it's like the title of your page, essentially. Like what you want the main representation of. How can I explain it? Well, it's kind of like, if you go on Google and you search something up and you have a web page that pops up and you have the name of the web page. That main web page. Here, let me just search something actually. If I search up like synthesizers, see, like it just says synthesizer for this Wikipedia web page, or for what's one that's more a little bit dynamic? Synthesizers.com. .com. Actually, this might be in the head tag. Now that I'm thinking about it, tiny bit rusty on my web dev stuff, but essentially, like you have this. I guess the general idea kind of carries. You have this hierarchy of like organized information. It's just like headings, like in a paper, like in an essay that you write. You have your main title, that would be your H1, and then if you have like subsections in your paper, then your H2s would be those subsections. And if you have subsections within each of those subsections, then you utilize your H3s. There's some different philosophies that I see at times, or that I did see when I was really into web dev, where like people would use headings within like particular elements. I don't know if that's there's definitely some context there that you're gonna have to delve into in terms of like it's kind of a more special situation. Right, I think that like the rules don't work as well. That, or people just aren't using like proper HTML. I don't know. So let me see. Yeah, honestly, guys, like questions like this are a little bit too advanced for stuff like this. At least like it's not what I'm aiming for. I'm just gonna focus on basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript. There's definitely good questions though. Honestly, I would drop them into the MLH Discord chat. I would check that out, and someone could give you like a proper response to that sort of thing. Okay, so just kind of looking through here. Okay, how to adopt the HTML page fit with multiple web browsers. So that will touch upon a little bit with CSS. Definitely an important thing to know in terms of just CSS as a whole. So we will definitely kind of go over that. I'm sitting crisscross applesauce right now, and my leg's getting tired. I don't know. Anywho, getting back to the important stuff. So we have our HTML. Now we want to style it so that we have a presentable web page. That's where our CSS comes in. So for CSS, again, you can call it anything that you want. I think the most common CSS, like for your homepage, the most common one that I see, like in terms of just like a very basic, like one-page website, a lot of people use like style.css. I've also seen like app.css and or like styles.css. Doesn't really matter. In fact, you probably want to name it something that corresponds to the page that the CSS is for. But we'll stick to like style.css just because you see that in a lot of beginner tutorials for this sort of stuff. Okay, so with that, we want to write CSS to affect our HTML. So I made a CSS file to do so, but now I have to link my HTML file, my CSS file with the HTML file. So the way that you do that is, in fact, we actually have to utilize, yeah, here. Okay, so a little bit of explanation required here. So I showed you all how to write basic HTML with semantic HTML elements, right, to kind of give the page meaning. However, you need some additional code to get your web page to just kind of behave well and to access some additional like features. We call this code HTML boilerplate. So boilerplate is like a general programming term where you it's just kind of like pre-written code that is so often used that someone pre-wrote it, so you can just load it up and get started with it. So we have this boilerplate here. Kind of walk you all through it really quickly. You don't have to. So this doctype.html that just tells the web browser, hey, like we're working with HTML. Like specifically, there's like specific, I don't know. Honestly, I don't really know the intricacies of it. I just know that you need it. HTML language. So you need this HTML element. Again, you just need it. Now your head element is where you have like metadata for the page. And your body element is where you put your content. So the content of the page, this is what we have written here, right? This is like the actual stuff that we want to display. So we're going to take this code, and we can take the comments too. That's fine. We're going to take this code and we're going to put it within the body. And also indent it so that actually, do I have prettier? How do I do that again? I'm surprised it's not just. You can get extensions which will just like format your code for you properly. But just to make things a little bit more digestible. I know I have it installed, but I just can't think off the top of my head how to invoke it. But anyways, so now we can see that I have my, so I have the, as we saw, we have the, this like metadata here that the browser needs. We have our HTML element, which again, the browser just needs to be like a viable web page that's going to stand up with all the others. You have your head element, which has your metadata, which we'll get into in a second. And then you have your body tag, which is like the content that you actually write for the page. Like this is the stuff that you want people to see and interact with and the like. So now for our CSS file, to hook it up to our HTML page, we have to write code for that in the head. So we do, what do we do again? Relation, link, yes. So I'm using this thing called Emmet, by the way, which is, you can see here, like Emmet abbreviation. This is also a extension that you can download for your coding environment, where I can, it's basically just an autocomplete for your code. So I can just type this out, and instead of typing out the whole thing here, like you'll see here, this is what you need to link up a CSS file. I just type link, so it knows what I want, and boom. I just click on that, types it out for me. Super helpful. That's pretty helpful in and of itself, but you can do a bunch of crazy stuff with it. We'll see in a second. But now I've set up this relationship. I'm telling this header file here, or I'm telling the index.html file, I'm saying, hey, I want you to link up to this file here, the style.css. href is basically like just pointing the file to another file. Like this is where this file exists. You can see that both these files are in the same directory. They're in the same folder. So I just directly tell it, hey, go to the style.css file. Now, say I had a folder within this project, like I don't know, let's call it CSS. You can call it anything. Let's say I place the CSS file within it. Then I'd have to specify like, hey, this is in the folder CSS. I'm after this style.css file, and this is how you get to it, right? So that's what your href is. That kind of points to a particular file or a particular place on your computer. The relationship that this file has to the HTML is that it's a style sheet. So that's kind of what CSS is all about, as we'll talk about. And it's just a link element. That's just what you use for this. So now we have the, I can keep it in there. I can take it out. It doesn't really matter. Though, of course, I'll have to change my file path as a result. But now I have it set up. So now I can start writing styles for this. So the beauty of CSS, one of the beauties, is that, like I said, we can actually go in and target these individual HTML elements so that we can style them as we please. So let's say I want to style this, let's say I want to style the entire body. So the body is like the entire content of the web page. So I could style, like it's the container that holds all the content of the web page. So essentially what that means is I can go in, I can target the body, and I can say, let's change the background color to red. And now I can go boop, and boom, change the color. Let's see. The prettier extension. Okay, good to know. Thank you, thank you. Status bar. Yeah, I definitely do have prettier. I just I do so many things with coding. I get pretty rusty on areas that I haven't used like immediately. Extensions. Oh, perfect. Okay. Oh, this is for installing though, right? Anyways, I don't know. Not important right now. But I thank you all for showing me that. So I do have it installed. I just have to get off my butt and remember how to use it. So with that, right, we changed the background color. of this body element. Because so what exactly is going on here? Like, why did this code that I typed, why did it work? How do I know that I could type this out and it would work? So let's kind of break it down. This body here, this is an HTML element. So you have to target HTML elements in this case. So I can use my body, or I get my H1 paragraph tag, so on and so forth. But I have to target something that's actually like within the HTML that CSS can recognize. So like HTML element is one way to do that. Every HTML element, again, HTML elements are essentially, like, when it comes down to it, if you strip everything away, all HTML elements are essentially the same thing. Now, in practicality, that's complete nonsense. But just in terms of understanding them as like an entity, in the most fundamental way, all HTML elements are essentially the same thing in terms of how you can treat them and what you can do to them. So in terms of like, and that applies to styling too. So for any of these, I could change their color, I could change their font sizes, I could do all sorts of different stuff. Now it's going to behave slightly differently depending on like the exact element, but you have access to all the different styles, like or all the different like attributes of an element. You can all HTML elements essentially have the same ones, and you can style all of them. So like, it's not like I can just type in background color, like that wasn't randomly typed in. That's an actual like style attribute of an HTML element. Another one would be color, which is like your font color. So I could do like whites. Another one would be font size. So I could say like 15 pixels. So this is going to apply to everything within this body. If you style a container, a lot of times like everything within it will take on the styles of that container. So that's kind of what's going on now. Let's make it like really obnoxious. Let's say like 60 pixels. What else do I want to do? We could say like font weight. Is it font weight? I think it's bold. No. Actually, let's see. So you can see like I increased the font size of everything. I changed the font color to white. That's what color is. It's font color. And you can see how everything changed from there. So that's just a basic demonstration of styling for like CSS and the like. Let's get a little bit more realistic and practical here. So a couple things that you can do is, let's see, I'm gonna wipe this. Let's do a less ugly color. So you can do, CSS has like these colors kind of automatically written into it. But a lot of times what people will do instead is they'll specify exact colors with something like hex values for colors. So like if I wanted to do white, it would be like FFF. I'm not sure if you, let's see. It's like color picker, hex values. So you can have like a color picker here that you can, okay. Weird. Oh, probably because I'm my browser tools. Can you like get out of here? Thank you. So I can choose colors along here. Well, in theory, at least. Why is this not working? Maybe the JavaScript like screwed up. Who knows? There we go. Okay. So yeah, there might have been a JavaScript issue actually. Sometimes things just don't load right on a web page. I've definitely had it to where I'd load a web page up and the CSS just didn't load. So everything just looks like a mess. And there's like no colors or anything to it. It's just like the pure raw content. It just looks ugly. But if you refresh the page, then you give it another chance to load it properly. So that's what happened there. So anyways, you can see that I'm selecting different colors on here, and you can see that these different values up here are changing. So these three are different ways of essentially accomplishing the same thing. It's like defining a color absolutely. Like you give colors like an absolute value that you can then compare within an overall system. So so for example, like say I wanted to use, I'm gonna get like a beige color. I don't know why, I'm just feeling it. It's kind of gray. I guess this works, whatever. Well, actually, let's get something a little bit more obvious. So I can take, so I have like this greenish color. I could take this hex value of it and specify this exact color that I want to use for my, say for the backgrounds. So I can do that, boot this up, and you can see, boom, changed. So just an important thing for color. These different ways of doing it, you can also do RGB values and HSL values, kind of a whole thing in of themselves of like why you'd want to use these over hex. I don't really see, I usually see HSL now, at least from what I've been looking at like the most modern websites, but you definitely want to, I don't know. It's like, I don't know how this stuff works at the end of the day. Like on the absolute deepest level, as long as you can just get the colors that you need, that's all that you need. But with that, so we can see that we can affect the styling there. Let me just keep up with the chat. Okay, so changing the background color. Let's go on to change the styling of some other elements. So what we can do is, so you can target like HTML elements, that's fine. Let's do this. I'm going to target all these paragraphs. I'm going to make a few different things of paragraphs just because I want to like separate these things in terms of their styling. This could be one way to do it. I could say like, hello world, my name is Zane. This is the website for my blog. I have to add that T, yeah. Please enjoy, please browse and enjoy. Blah. We'll just leave that out. Okay, so now I have all these different paragraph tags. And you can have like this space on here on the top and bottom, doesn't really matter. The code will read it the same way. I like doing this just because I can more easily kind of just see what's happening. I can easily separate the tag from the content. I don't know if this is like best practice or anything. Probably depends on particular project's code base and style guidelines and all that. But anyways, so I have all these things here. Now let's say I want to, so how can I style these? Let's say I want to style all of them individually. Like how would I do that? There's a few ways to do it. Because what will happen is that if I want to style them all individually, but say I try to target the paragraph tag, for example, if I go like color red and say I only want like the first one, the hello world, to be in red, well, now they all turn red. So that I can't really do that. So I have to have a workaround. There's a few ways to do it, but the one that I want to touch on, because you'll be using this all of the time with CSS, is the concept of a class. So a class is essentially like giving a unique nickname to an element so you can refer to it specifically. That's kind of the best way to understand it. I'll clarify that in a second. Not perfect explanation, but we'll touch upon that in a second. So if I want to style this in particular, I can say, what do I want to call it? You can name classes anything. Let's call it, I don't know, red text. And so instead of targeting the P tag as a whole, I'm going to target this class. The way that you specify classes in your CSS is you put a dot at the beginning. Oops, and make sure that you spell your class right, because if you have a typo, it won't pick it up. But there we go. So red text, and for the red text, I told it I want the font color to be red. So there we go. I have it on there. Now, the cool thing too is, like, of course, you can, it's just like styling an HTML element. You can actually do like multiple styles and the like. So if I wanted to do, I don't know, like fonts, does it pop up? No, annoying. Oh, I think it has to be like font family. Anyways, I'm not going to get into that. We have that. We have, I don't like font style. Why is this not? Oh, because my CSS. There we go. There we go. Okay, so I had my coding environment was kind of set up weird. Font family, so I can like change the font of it. I can change all sorts of different stuff, right? So the font changed slightly. You can't really see it, but anywho, so I can target like particular things with this way. Now the cool thing about a class is that it's not, you don't have to apply it to just one element. You can use the same class on different elements. It doesn't even have to be the same type of HTML element. You can actually use it on different elements. So here I have it on this P class. I can put it on this P class if I wanted to. the same styling. And then I could put it on, like, say, this H2 here. And there we go. So it has all the attributes that I have specified in this red text here. So that's kind of the basics of, like, the most practical, the practical of just, like, bare minimum what you need to know about CSS. Quite a few other helpful concepts to know, however. Let me see. Yeah, for sure. You have good questions. I would say definitely, like, drop them in the MLH channel on the Discord. Just, like, if they're a little bit, like, if they're more, like, complex, I would say it'd probably be your best bet, honestly. Can you click on the little square behind red? Yes, actually, that is now that my VS Code wasn't recognizing this as a CSS file at first, or whatever this is. I don't know if this is, like, inherent to CSS or this is some part of an extension, but yeah, now that it recognizes it as a CSS, I think it must have been CSS as a whole. It recognizes it as a CSS file now, so now you have, like, all these additional benefits. So you saw before I was typing stuff in and, like, just nothing was coming up for autocomplete, but now that it recognizes it as CSS, all these different properties pop up. So now, yeah, it actually has this feature where you have a color selector within it as well, and this is, like, directly in your code. So that's pretty amazing. You can even do like the alpha channel to affect the transparency. Very helpful. So probably won't really show up very well. Yeah. But anyways, so just some additional stuff on CSS. I do want to get to JavaScript, and I do want to do, like, a slightly realistic building of a website if we have the time for it. A couple things about JavaScript, or a couple things about CSS. Some additional concepts that you want to look into are the cascading aspect of CSS. So say that I have a class here for red text. Say I have, like, this color that I've identified, right? It's going to change my font color. Say I have another color specified. Like, say I want to do, I don't know, like that. Well, now I'm giving it two conflicting instructions. Like, do the color here, and now do this color here. Now, usually you're not going to come up in this sort of scenario where it's, like, really obvious that, like, oh, you specified two colors. But where it kind of gets, where it can happen is, say, like, you have this, we can see that this H2 that we're changing the color of, we can see that it's within this div here. So let's say I have this, let's say I put a class on this div where it's, like, article, right? So, and I can put it on the second one here too, actually, if I wanted to. Makes sense because they're both, like, these little article things. Say I go down, I want to style this article. It's a class, so I have to put the dot. And I want to do, like, say I'll change the font size, blah, 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 to whatever, and do other stuff. And then I, specify a color here. Or I want this to be, I don't know, like, purple. So this article 2 is getting the purple color, right? But this article 1 isn't, at least on this header. So why? Well, it's because this article 1 and the H2 within this article 1 has this class for red text. Actually, I should probably change that back to red text just to make it easily understandable. Right, so this has this class of red text on this H2. But also, for the article as a whole, it has this text for purple. So, like, which one is going to win out? There's a whole philosophy to this, and situations get a lot more complex, especially when you're dealing with a large code base and you're, like, using multiple classes with all sorts of styling, so on and so forth. You want to look into the concept of CSS, like, cascading, and what is it called? It's not CSS priority. Let me see. CSS priority styling. I'm trying to remember what it's called. Specificity. CSS specificity. Let's jump into here. So there's CSS specificity, which is kind of just goes on to describe like when you have these sort of conflicts, how do these conflicts went out? Hoping MDM docs would have a pretty approachable thing to it, but specificity. There's some good tutorials that you can find online of like if you have conflicting styles, which one will win out. There's a whole thing to it. It's a little bit more complex than I want to get into at the moment, but just important thing to cover. One more thing on CSS is responsiveness. So let's go into that real quick. So again, I'm going to go back to, let's go back to the MLH website. I'll share my screen in just a second. Let's do, yes. So not writing conflicting rules in general is a pretty good approach. Sometimes you can't get around it, or sometimes it just kind of makes sense within the architecture of how you have your site set up. But generally a good thing to follow. Yeah, for sure. Margins and padding, that I won't get into. I think that's something that you guys can kind of discover yourself a little bit more. I can definitely drop resources in the chat if there's anything that anyone's interested in. I like learning more about. Definitely help give you some like just perspective on that. So just helpful things on CSS. I'd say the final thing to really be aware of is how CSS affects, is responsible for responsiveness. So JavaScript stuff I will get into, but HTML and CSS is so important to kind of get a good grasp on that. Like for web dev basics, like basic JavaScript, you're really not going to do much apart from just really utilizing like interactivity for like, you know, clicking a button or, you know, clicking like in that Google example that we had, or for like basic event listeners, which we'll talk about. JavaScript really doesn't get that crazy until you get like deeper into web development, kind of outside the scope of this little talk. The most basic JavaScript that you really need is that sort of like really essential, like just click and something happens. So will we get the code later? I could upload it if you guys want. This really isn't like anything amazing, honestly. If you go to any HTML like CSS tutorial out there, it's going to cover the same exact stuff. And I don't know. I could update it if like, or I could upload it if enough people say they really want it. Otherwise, like, it's kind of just the same stuff that you'll cover in any sort of like HTML CSS course. Do I prefer backend or front end JavaScript? So I mainly learned front end JavaScript myself because I wanted to be a front end web developer for a while. But as I kind of learned the job more and more, or just the role, I just kind of realized it wasn't really for me. So, but I mean, you know, different strokes for different folks. Could I use ID instead of class? What is the difference? Yes, you could use IDs. That's another thing that you can apply to HTML elements. I don't want to get into IDs at the moment, though, just because they're, I mean, eventually you will learn about them. But I think just like classes, you can get by just utilizing them at the end of the day. I mean, at least for like the most basic of stuff. Is just to revise what you did. Yeah, I could. I'll post it in the MLH Discord and maybe I'll like put it in a zip file. So yeah, I mean, there are some other things about CSS that we could talk about, like the box. What is it? Like the box model for different HTML elements in terms of like how padding and margin and all that sort of stuff works. Definitely important things to read up on. I'll drop links to that in the chat, I think, while we get like closer to the end, just how you guys can continue learning about this sort of stuff. A great resource just in general is MDM docs that I will drop. I can drop it right now since I mentioned it. In fact, since I mentioned these things, let me just drop both of them. So MDN docs is kind of like the Bible of, well, it's kind of like a dictionary of, maybe encyclopedia, I don't know what you'd call it, but it's basically a resource for like understanding all the different attributes and elements and the like that you'd want to do like with basic HTML, CSS, and like a lot of the stuff with JavaScript too. Very, very helpful resource for just It's not like a tutorial. It's not really going to teach you how to do from A to Z. There's a tutorial aspect to it, actually. They do have them within the site, but I think it goes a little bit too in depth from what at least from what I remember going through it. It just kind of gives you a lot of things you don't need. There might be a slimmed down version. I haven't looked at it in a while. But it's really good as a resource for just refreshing yourself on the particularities of particular elements. As well as it's like CSS stuff that's good to know about. Definitely the box model, and people were talking about like margins and paddings and all of that. I talked about CSS specificity, but there's an MDN page on it, but it's just way too in depth. But again, I think just kind of starting with this stuff, it's a little bit dense. Probably better to pace yourself with like a proper curriculum. Because you can make, basic web pages like with just HTML. We didn't even cover like all the essentials that you like should have under your belt to make like a proper website with HTML. Kind of just like give you a taste of just like the general things to know about it. That way, once you jump into like a proper curriculum, you kind of get a sense of like how things should work, and you just kind of learn the additional pieces that you need to make things work. Same thing with that, and same thing with CSS. There are a few concepts of CSS that you should cover, but again, anyways, we have the basics of all that in place now. So last thing that I want to talk about with CSS, just because it's super important, and it's kind of invisible until you are just kind of aware that it's a thing, is website responsiveness. So basically, let me show my entire screen again. If it wants to, there we go. Okay. So basically, when you have a website and you try to put it onto different screen sizes, you're going to notice that the website does not keep the same shape or the same layout or anything of the sort with regards to its content. So in your DevTools, every DevTool that I've used, at least in your browser-based DevTools, has an ability for you to test out different dimensions and like screen sizes. So here right now, I can emulate, say, like a screen size of like a large laptop, it says. And now I can go and do like a tablet. And we can start to see that the layout starts to change, right? So on the tablet size, we have like a one column for all the information. Whereas before, I think on the large, right? So on the desktop, or sorry, on the laptop's desktop, however, you have this like 2-column layout. And I think the images, were they, let's see. Yeah, like the logo on the left-hand side, this stuff here. You had some stuff on the right-hand side before, but now it's all like one column. So not the craziest change, but once we start getting smaller, right, we can see that the images get placed on top. And like the text, everything is like completely vertical now. You don't have the same nav bar now, right? It's all condensed into this drop-down bar. So this stuff just doesn't happen automatically. You have to actually go in and program this stuff yourself. Now, there are some solutions where you can kind of systematize this stuff to where you say, okay, like when the screen width becomes less than like 1,000 pixels, like put everything into one column, and it'll kind of automatically do that. But still, you have to still give it that direction. This is all done with CSS. This is responsive design, it's called. And with responsive design, you utilize CSS and you utilize things like media queries, media queries are kind of like your different boundaries of screen size. You can specify by the pixel here. So you can say that, like, see, this one is for 320 pixels and anything below, you're going to use this layout logic. And then once you get above 320 pixels, so we can see at the top here, make sure that we're okay. Once I pass these different boundaries, layout changes, right? So responsive design is super, super big. You have to have a responsive website. People use all sorts of devices to access their web pages. right? If your website works on mobile, but it doesn't work on desktop or vice versa, it's a failed website, right? It's not in a proper stage to launch it out into the world, because you're going to alienate a large portion of potential user base. We just kind of take this stuff for granted, right? I didn't even know this was really a thing. Like, websites just kind of worked in my eyes in terms of going from one device to another. But like, obviously, it's once you actually start designing this stuff, you actually have to implement it yourself actively. So yeah, responsive design is huge for CSS as well. So anywho, that's all I'll say on CSS for now. So we talked about HTML, again, the content and the structure of your page, and like the meaning, like the semantic contextualization of your different content on the page. And then you have your CSS, which helps you style all the different content on your page. So we can see here, like we can see, you know, this nav bar here, background color of white, all these different like all these different texts for the drop-down menus here, right? They have a particular styling to them, and there's all sorts of stuff in with styling that we could go into if we really wanted to. But that's enough to get you guys started. I think people wanted to see some JavaScript, so we'll kind of focus on that as well. So is media queries of pixels width the only way to do responsiveness, or are there more? No, there's actually other ways of doing responsiveness as well. In fact, I think pixels is pretty, I think doing it by pixels is pretty archaic from what I remember. You actually have different units of, okay, this is it. You have different units of, what would you even call it? You just have different units of like usability within CSS. So I've just shown you guys pixels, but it's actually pretty rare that you use pixels. Nowadays, what people utilize are responsive units. So pixels are static, like, you know, 2 pixels is 2 pixels, 10 pixels is 10 pixels. But if, say, you have a web page and you, how to describe it? Like, say you have a web page and on your desktop, you have this big page, right? You want the text to be like, I don't know. The text is going to be one size. As you get smaller and smaller screen size, right here, it's kind of homogeneous because it's like on this laptop screen. You can imagine, like, if you have a phone that has a small screen to it, and you have like relatively small screen on your desktop size for your stylings. Where am I going with this? Sorry, I feel like I could explain this better. Essentially, your screen sizes are not going to be the same, like from device to device to device. A classic example of where that could be a problem is, say, something like font size. On your big screens, you might not need like absolutely huge font sizes because you have a pretty big screen. On smaller screens, with smaller and smaller width, if you have like big text, well, then everything's gonna like, it's just gonna push everything like down. So if I do, like, say, font size, actually, let me go to the body. Man. But if I have this small screen size, but I do like a big font size, like you would do on a large, or I don't know. There's all sorts. It's contextual. Like if your text is too big or your text is too small. Is that actually just not? Oh, I guess it. If I do that. There we go. Okay, now it's starting to mess up. Like, so I could have like this big. Why is nothing else getting affected by that though? That's weird. Oh, it's probably tied up to the HTML actually. That's like an old trick. Is that really not it? Oh, because I have to do font size. Sorry, kind of de-rusting here a little bit. Or is everything just images and that's why? That's crazy. I don't know why that's not working. There we go. So, well, at least it's like obnoxious here. I don't know. Might work better on a larger screen size. Probably not. Sorry, I wish I had a better example for you off the top of my head. But basically, some things have to change size just to accommodate like the natural screen size, and I don't know. Let me see. So where can we read about responsiveness? Yeah, let me give you a resource that can explain it better than me off the top of my head at the moment. I think that'd be more helpful, honestly. Let me see. So I think web.dev, is that it? Let me see. So this is a pretty crazy helpful website. I think it might be a little bit too cutting edge, but design course, Free Code Camp. Yeah, honestly, Free Code Camp is your best bet. They do have a responsive web design course. I would go for that, for the basics of responsive web design. For anyone that's interested, though, I mean, this is a little bit more advanced, but just a good thing to know is this web.dev website as well. This has a lot of great, yeah, this is definitely a lot more advanced. I don't know why this came to mind first, but it's very nice for like once you get to like more intermediate, more advanced level of like CSS. They have some stuff on responsive design, but yeah, definitely the Free Code Camp. Let me post that actually. Thank you for bringing that up. Free Code Camp, responsive design. Okay, then we'll get into a little bit of JavaScript. But again, for your basic web design or your basic web dev, JavaScript doesn't really have too much crazy stuff going on. But we can definitely like kind of walk through. We'll see what we get up to by the end of the hour with JavaScript. Yeah, something along those lines. I know I kind of just completely fudged that explanation and went on and kind of continued off on a different tangent. But yeah, so like, well, let me get to my main point with that. So pixels are like a static unit to where like 12 pixels is 12 pixels. Whereas now, what a lot of people will do, and which will definitely be colored in this responsive web design course, is that they'll use responsive units. So basically, like you can use a unit that gets its size based off of the size of your screen width, so that like the proper ratio of like the text size will have a ratio to the screen width. So that way, the text is just always like perfectly sized to it. So the responsive unit that people like use for that most often that I see is like your rem units, but you should probably just search up like responsive units for CSS. Like here's a I mean, it doesn't really give you like the proper context and like kind of just tells you everything like frankly, but you read a little bit more about CSS units. Again, like you don't just want to like blindly, like, you know, I said, oh, pixels aren't really used for a lot of things now. You don't just want to go, okay, well then I'll just use like rem like blindly. You have to kind of understand what you're doing with it. But like that's what like a curriculum is for. So that Free Code Camp one should definitely do you pretty well. So I think that's enough HTML and CSS for now. Again, you should have enough information to just kind of get a feel for like once you drop into one of these courses, like you'll kind of have a sense of like just what to expect and kind of like why certain things work. And it lays a foundation that you can build upon essentially. So typically people will do HTML, at least, I mean, I guess everyone's path is a little bit different, but usually what I've seen is that people will focus a lot on HTML and CSS at first, because you really don't need, I mean, for like a modern day, like big scale website enterprise, yeah, you definitely do need JavaScript and some like more advanced web development tools built on top of that. But like I know guys that just do HTML and CSS. Like, that's literally all they do. Like hand coded, like I was just doing, just HTML and CSS, and they do websites for small businesses, and like they rake in like crazy dough. So just with HTML and CSS, you can build a what's what I'm looking for. You can build a website you can just like put out to the world, like a 5-page, 10-page, 20-page website for a small business. Just HTML and CSS, you can do that with. I have to go. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you everyone here who's watching. Really appreciate it. hope it's been helpful so far. I think it's definitely will help you lay a foundation for once you dive deeper into HTML and CSS and web development as a whole. Definitely, you should have a good feeling of it's like the things that are being talked about and like new values that get like new concepts that get added on top. So with that, what was I saying? HTML, CSS. Oh yeah, I mean, really, you can just do HTML, CSS, build static websites, they're called, and you could like be a small, you could like just have your own small business doing that for other businesses. Like I know people that make pretty crazy money doing that. They're like hyper specialized in HTML and CSS. But I mean, like if you're going to school or if you want to work at like, your standard company out in the world, you need to know some JavaScript, and that just kind of gets you started. There's some additional tools on top of all of this that are all based in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but that you kind of need if you want to be like a quote unquote modern web developer. So with this, let's touch a bit on the fundamentals of JavaScript, just kind of get a taste of it all again. And from there, we'll kind of see how we utilize it in the actual web page. So with that, let's do entire screen. Where is my page that I was working on? I'll share my screen in just a second, just making sure I can get this up. Here we go. Okay, so let's start with basic JavaScript. So you can actually write JavaScript directly in the, well, you can do some stuff with JavaScript. So remember before how I took that, I ran that thing of code. This here, well, not this, where's it at? Oh, wait, hold on. That's so weird. We can not see that. Oh, wait, okay, hold on. That was in the Brave browser, that's why. So you can see here, like I had this page, and I ran that snippet of code, which this document had .parent.node, remove child, blah, 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 all of that. This is JavaScript. This is telling JavaScript to essentially just remove the styling from this entire page. And so it does that. So what that means is that in your dev tools, you can actually write JavaScript in the browser. Now, you're not going to write it in the browser to like actually finally implement within your code. You're still going to do that in like VS Code. We'll see how to do that in a second. But it's just kind of good to know that you can do this stuff in the browser. So you can do basic. I mean, if you haven't looked into a scripting language yet, definitely do that. Like JavaScript is definitely the place to start if you're doing web development. But you can do all sorts of different stuff, mathematical operations. You can do all sorts of different stuff. We're not going to get into like you don't really need to know like the most fundamentals of JavaScript for something this basic that we're looking at today. If you definitely want to go through like a little course on it, you'll learn like all the stuff from the ground up. But we're going to focus on just the things that you need to implement some basic like universal functionality for a website. So one of those would be, for example, let's say I'm on my web page and I want to implement a button where the user clicks it and something happens. So what I want to do is, well, first in my HTML, I could technically do any of these HTML elements. I could add functionality to, but we'll add a button. There's an HTML element for a button. We'll use that just to be proper. Click me for I don't know, for a cool effect. Let's say that. Okay, so we have our button now. Default styling, as we talked about, so it doesn't look very nice. We can change that later if we want to. Not our biggest concern right now. So I have a button. Doesn't do anything for me. It's like if I went to the store and I bought a light switch. Okay, I have a light switch, but it's not hooked up to anything, so it's not going to do anything. So click, 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 nothing happens. So I have to tell JavaScript, I have to utilize JavaScript to have it do something. So we are going to make a JavaScript file. So a .js file is your JavaScript file. Again, you can name it anything that you want. I see and all sorts of names. I think I've seen like app.js for some. This is like a default name, so that works. Now for your basic web development, people usually put JavaScript scripts at the end of your, this is how I do it. Let's see, app.js. People will usually put scripts at the very end of the HTML file. I think it's something with like, you typically want the, this is just a guess, I don't remember the exact reason for it, but I think it's that you want to make sure that all your content and styles and everything load before the final script. When you actually get more advanced, you will put JavaScript scripts like higher up and blah, 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 but this will get you started. This is how most beginners are taught it, at least. So I think that is correct. Let me see. So if I do, so I have my app.js file now. I did the source. I think that should be correct. It might be href. I'll see in a second. But what we can do is we can say to JavaScript, hey, console.log, this is saying in the browser dev tools, print this message. I could say testing. I don't know, whatever I want, even with a typo, why not? So with this now, I should be able to refresh this and boot this up. There we go. So yeah, that is correct. So testing. So now I know that the reason why I did this is that I can see that my JavaScript is now linked up to my HTML file. So this is saying that essentially what I'm telling my website is HTML file loads, make sure that you load this app.js, and this app.js will automatically print, it'll automatically show to the console this testing message. So now, in terms of actually creating some functionality, your best friend with this is your document.query selector. And the way that we do this is, let me think. So essentially what this does, this document.query selector, is it's JavaScript's way to like lock in on an element. Because I could do like, I could click on anything and have it do something. How do I know that I want this exact button? I have to go into the HTML. And oftentimes you'll, there's a few different ways to do this. I've seen how people do it kind of evolve. But you give it some sort of, do like data. Oh gosh, I don't remember how to do that exactly. I'm just gonna stay away from that for right now. But like a lot of people will use something called an ID. You can only have one ID per element. So this is just a good way to like naturally lock in on a particular element. So we'll say, I don't know, we'll call it main button. I don't know. You can call it anything that you want. So now I have this element. And now I have a way to like specifically refer to it in the eyes of JavaScript. So now I can tell it. Oh wait, actually, hold on. Query selector. I think I do that, right? Let's see. Dot. So we could say main button. So now I'm giving, so I have this thing here, right? This is actually selecting this element here. But I don't want to, I'm going to have to like do additional things to it. So instead of like always doing this big old thing to identify, people don't call me by my full name all the time, right? They just call me by my short name, or they can call me by a nickname. They know who they're talking about. Same thing here. This is a JavaScript variable. So it's kind of like in math, you know, X is equal to, you can call it whatever you want. And you can change that value over time even. Actually, I think we have to do const. There we go. Okay. Been learning Python for like the past year. So gotta remind myself of the little JavaScriptisms. Inline.js goes at end, files are linked on tab. Okay. Yeah, definitely good to know. Should work either way, but that definitely sounds like best practice. So we have this here. I can do like main button. So I'm just having JavaScript recognize like, hey, this is this. Like I wanna do stuff to this button now. So now here I'm gonna do something called add event listener. So an event is just some sort of interaction on the page. So like you can hover your mouse over something and you've like initiated an event with that entity. Or you click on it or what have you. Or you can even like scroll. The different types of like events. It's like interactivity that the user has with the with an element or something with the page as a whole. Now an event listener is saying like, hey, I want you to, like, if this sort of thing happens onto this element, like a button click, then I want you to do something in response to that. So we're saying, okay, so main button, add event listener. So I want you to pay attention for when the user clicks on it. And then some additional stuff here is not really important. But when this happens, I want to change, let's say I want to change the, what can I do? I guess we could change the button color just to kind of make it easy. Oh man, hold on. Just a style class list. So very good thing to know too when you're developing is that Google will be your absolute best friend because you will get rusty on things. All my best dev friends say this. They have to look up stuff that they haven't used. Like they know how to do it, but like the exact code that they have to type out, they forget. So you're gonna find yourself doing this a lot. If you have to do this yourself as a developer, there's not anything wrong with you. It's just perfectly natural. Like it's not that you don't have the potential or anything. It's just how development works. So if we do JavaScript, CSS styling, element, something like that, we'll see. DOM CSS. Dot style. Okay, so we would do dot style. So this is kind of what we did. Document. We could do get element by ID, but there's a more general one of query selector. So we have that. So now it wants to say for the style dot property, which would be like say the text color, for example. So we'd say main button dot style. Oh, really? That should work. That's no weird. I don't know why it's auto clicking into that. Dot text color or color. We'll see if it works. It should work. Red. So we click on this. Oh my goodness, that's annoying. Let's see what's going on. Reading add event listener. Type no. Weird. Oh, because I don't have the, okay, so you need this pound sign here to signify that it's an ID. If I just put this, it's kind of like in the CSS, right? Like you would do a dot for the class. For an ID, you have to do a pound sign. So we're using an ID here, so we have to do that so I can properly recognize it. Okay, so now if we try to click it, there we go. Works perfect. So we click it and the color changes. Now, I mean, you can do anything with this, right? Say you have an email, like you have a sign up for our email, like newsletter. You can have a text field and you have a submit button. You can have it to where when a person clicks that submit button, it takes the information from the text field and sends it to like your SQL database, or it adds it to some sort of like data repository. You can, I mean, JavaScript is like anything is possible with it. You really can't do it justice in just this short amount of time that we have here. But that kind of gets you to the basics of like what you want to use JavaScript for. So, I mean, you're probably not going to change text color on a button with a button press. Just easy thing to demonstrate. But usually what you'll do it for, the thing that you'll essentially have on every website is when you're dealing with, like, let's do this. Make sure I'm showing everything. Okay, so big example, which you'll see on like every single website nowadays, is when you have like this hamburger menu, it's called, where you can click it and you have a drop down here. So this isn't anything special. This is just like an image, or it's like an SVG, which is essentially just like an image. So we can see that it's a button, and within this button we have basically just the stuff that's making up the visual of the button. And there's some like meta stuff, but that's all you need. So it's just the visual of the button. So we can see that, well, like this data toggle, data target, all that sort of stuff, that's actually used for JavaScript. That's how people usually, from what I've seen nowadays, they don't really use IDs for like JavaScript targeting. They'll usually do like data attributes, these are called. But again, that's something that you all can read up on your own time. Just kind of makes the most sense. But the overall principle remains the same. Like you assign an element some sort of like name or ID or whatever, so you can refer to it in JavaScript. And then, like in this case, they just did the same thing. They added an event listener, and what they said for when the event listener is clicked is to display this div, this HTML element, which has like all this stuff inside of it. And then when you click it again, you just take away its visibility. So that's like your most basic JavaScript that you'll use. There's some other things that you can do too. Like, for example, like say you're on a like basic web form, and people can like comment on something. So what you can do is, where can I go on? Like, what's a good website for that? I mean, like every website in existence has commenting now, but I want to see if there's something that like doesn't have a crazy UI or like not a busy one. Okay, can you go back to the HTML screen? I want to see what ID or class you added for the main button. Right, so the just call it main button. Again, you can call it anything that you want at the end of the day. Or just about anything. There are like best practices for naming conventions, and I think like some things you just can't use as the name because there's like just naming conventions that there's like naming conventions that are both like just kind of inherent to how the language works. Like you just can't do certain things. Like I know for like JavaScript, for example, for like variable names, you can't start a variable name off with like a number, a const one test. Right? It's going to yell at you, but you can use a number anywhere else within it. Stuff like that. So there's like hard like naming limitations or naming conventions, and there's kind of like soft ones, like the best practice just to communicate the best with people, or to have like a system that's easily digestible so people can understand what's going on just by jumping in blindly. Okay, let's see. Just going through the chat here, make sure I'm keeping up with everyone. Yes, you completely called it, Malode. Good. Yeah, you definitely need that pound sign for your IDs when you're referring to them, both in JavaScript and in your CSS files. JavaScript is fun, can add bouncing text, progress bars, all sorts of neat stuff. Yeah, like everything is possible with JavaScript, honestly. In fact, that is probably what we should end on here. Just talking a little bit about like how things are done nowadays. So, I mean, this stuff is really basic. You have to kind of know how this stuff works. You have to learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, because everything at the end of the day ultimately functions off of those. You'll hear a lot of people, depending on how new you are to web development or how much you've looked into it, you might have heard of things like React or Next.js or like Tailwind or templating, like HTML templating stuff. So these are like tools and languages built on top of these more basic languages, to where like it helps optimize the workflow process or redundancy in terms of how you write your code, or just gives a completely different paradigm of working with these technologies that's more conducive to modern web development. But at the end of the day, like even if, because you'll see people, they go to boot camps for like React, and React is essentially it's a JavaScript framework which is built around just being able to make user interfaces, like the front end of the web development, like purely with JavaScript. So you'll be writing HTML, CSS with JavaScript, and you'll do like all sorts of high level things like, how can I even put it in the layman's terms? Not that it's like complex or anything, but just that, I don't know. I haven't thought about React in a while, truth be told. And just trying to find the terminology that's doesn't have like a bunch of lingo within it. But you'll go on to learn how to make things like components and and you'll learn concepts such as like state and blah 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 blah. Just when you implement something like when you create something like React, you have all of these additional like principles and concepts that kind of manifest from it because it's just such a high level tool. But ultimately, your web pages are always going to come down to simply being HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So I've definitely read a million stories where people will go to boot camps for just React because they just want to do front-end web development, like perfectly fair. So they go to a React boot camp, they get some experience. I mean, this was a few years ago though, so like it was pretty easy to get an entry-level job or like an entry-level opportunity. Now it's basically impossible relative to like kind of the golden era. I don't say that'd be pessimistic, it's just that I don't know, kind of more of a side note. But these are people where like they went through a boot camp. They didn't really have like the greatest fundamentals or anything, but people were still hiring people straight out of boot camps, like in that position. So they'd get hired on to do web development work, and they could do stuff in React pretty well or decently enough, but they never learned like vanilla HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So they'd run into all these little situations where they just like it basically became like death by a thousand paper cuts, or they like just weighed down like the development process quite a bit, or like they had to use up resources from other people. Essentially, like it's just good to know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, vanilla, like without your frameworks and all at first, because everything eventually like boils down to those. And if you can learn the most essential concepts with them, and just the basics of like how things behave with them, then when you go on to more modern tooling like React or Next.js, like you won't have surprises in those domains because the effects of those are going to pop up because again, that's what websites are fundamentally made up of. So nice session. Thank you. Yes. So definitely you all are going to require a little bit more research. And like I said, the only way this is really going to stick and like really make like overall sense, I would say, is if you go through a curriculum that goes through these things in a like over a longer span of time. So like the free code camp responsive web design, I'm sure that's an amazing resource to like actually give you the long form view, see how everything connects, take you from like complete beginner to like actually making like a bona fide website, at least like bona fide like simple websites. I honestly don't think I would have learned React as well if I hadn't learned the basics of JS, HTML, and CSS. Yeah, same here. I did the same thing. I learned the basics first, then I moved on to React, and it was like basically completely easy. Like at least relative to, I can imagine it must be a nightmare like trying to learn React outside of that, because like there's just gonna be like a million things that happen that you don't understand why they are. Like you won't understand why, like a lot of common phenomenon, like just why they take place, why they behave that way. Unless the person has like a comprehensive enough, I don't know. Definitely helped me to understand HTML, CSS, JavaScript. That way I could just focus on React itself instead of having to focus on like learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript along with React. That would have been a lot on my plate. I basically did HTML, CSS for a while. And then, because again, you could, if your HTML and CSS aren't in place, like even on this website, like if you don't have functionality for your thing here, I mean, obviously important, but you could just have this like hanging out like this, honestly, on the website, and people would just scroll down, and that's it. Like there's no other JavaScript being used, like in a practical way for the user. That could still work, honestly, especially for like if you have a website that's like only a few pages, like for a small business. So like your styling and your HTML and all that, like if your stuff is completely whacked out and your users can't access things, they can't like, if your CSS is just completely wrong, then like you're just kind of screwed. That's something that I wish I realized a little bit sooner. Like CSS is crazy important. You can write kind of decent HTML, that's fine. It's just kind of hard to mess up HTML, like at least in like the most like bare bones, this works sort of way. There's definitely best practices, especially when you get into like accessibility and all of that. But like writing good CSS with like responsiveness and everything in mind, that is kind of a different story. That's kind of a whole beast in and of itself. I feel like it's not really appreciated, just like how much like you really have to get on your CSS game. Any application that will be written, that can be written in JavaScript, will eventually be written in JavaScript. Do I agree with this quote? Guess it depends on from what perspective talking about. I mean, there's definitely a big community of developers working on anything that you can imagine, really. It kind of blows my mind going through GitHub and just going on different repositories, seeing what people are up to. Kind of love it. I don't know. It's cool stuff. Coding is so fun because you don't like need any capital to like just do crazy stuff. I love it. But anyways, that's kind of it, honestly. That kind of takes us through our basic web dev. So again, we talked about HTML, the content and the structure of your page. So if we want to finish up with our, let me go back to Google actually. Or let's go back to this MLH site. All right, so HTML is our structure to the page in our content, and we saw that we can write, that was very intense there. We saw that we could write, why are you so, there we go. We can place things in contextual, we can use semantic HTML to give like context to things and to make it comprehensible for certain like software and solutions. And for like our case as developers, most immediately to help with like writing JavaScript and CSS in a more manageable way. So our HTML gives us structure in that way. Our CSS actually makes things like nice to look at and like comprehensible and usable, digestible, and accessible too. Because like if all that stuff is like out of whack, how are you going to be able to like access your links and everything, right? So usability is also a big part of CSS. And with CSS, you know, responsiveness and all pretty important stuff. Like the snap bar, right? We take it for granted. It's also important how responsive it is. And then for JavaScript, we saw how we can add basic interactivity. So again, for like clicking this here, JavaScript is what gives the action. It's what gives the result to like clicking this button here. That we can go on to like access the other stuff on the site. So HTML structure, CSS presentation and responsiveness, and JavaScript functionality. So we have another minute here or so. Any final questions of the like? Just curious. But this was definitely a fun stream. I will definitely just share the entirety of my screen going forward. I thought it might be a little bit messy, but it's definitely better than just not being able to see my screen. So thank you guys for bringing that up. But yeah, with this, you should have a pretty good foundation in hopping into like a, you know, basic web development course and just kind of get a feel for like what's being talked about. Should be able to take on those additional important concepts that we talked about, be able to implement those more fluidly. So with that, thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Best of luck to those who are starting classes this week or who have already started. And have a great rest of your beginners Global Hack Week.